Wildfires in the southeast rage on for a fifth day and are spreading fast to neighboring areas, leaving some 20 people dead. An appellate court overturned the lower court ruling and acquitted the main opposition Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung of election violation charges. The result is deemed critical for the nation's political landscape. Amid chronic population concerns, the number of newborns continued to increase in January to almost 24,000, recording the highest on-year growth percentage on record. It's March 26, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We begin with devastating wildfires that started last week in the southeastern part of the country. As it gets worse, some 20 people have been killed. Our Eun-hee is standing by at one of the areas hit hard by the disaster. Eun-hee, how is the situation there?
Yes, Jung-min, so now I'm in Andong City in Gyeongsang-buk-do Province. The wildfire that started in Uiseong-gun County on Saturday continues to spread. And where I'm standing right now is Haue Maul, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. A fire that is around 5 to 10 kilometers away from the village has been carrying smoke towards the area, and by noon today the smoke has thickened to a level where it's hard to breathe without wearing a mask. Residents have been evacuated and moving back and forth depending on the situation. Firefighters and residents are focusing on spraying water on homes and structures in the village every 2 hours to protect them from the flames. In this map, you can see how the fire has been spreading to neighboring cities and counties due to strong winds, including the counties of Yeongdeok, Yeongyang, Cheongsong, and here in Andong. On my way to the site a few hours ago, there was an evacuation order for residents in certain areas of Andong City. The challenging weather conditions, however, have been complicating the firefighting efforts. Meanwhile, the wildfire that started in Sancheong-gun County in Gyeongsang-namdo Province on Friday has been raging on for 6 days now. The flames have now spread to Hadong-gun County, even reaching around 200 meters inside Jirisan National Park. The containment rate, which was at 90% at one point on Tuesday, fell to 75% at around noon today. Authorities are fully mobilizing helicopters and ground firefighting teams in the area to bring the fire under control. However, the damage is worsening, and as of this evening, over 1,500 residents have been relocated to shelters. As residents are fleeing from the chaos, multiple casualties have been reported in Gyeongsang-buk-do Province and Gyeongsang-namdo Province. The latest update as of this evening shows a provisional estimate of at least 24 people dead and at least 26 injured. While one elderly person was found to have been completely consumed by the fire, others died during the evacuation process. The areas most heavily impacted are Uiseong-gun County and Andong City, where over 370 square kilometers have been affected. As of Wednesday, however, over 23,000 people are taking shelter in temporary facilities. Also, more than 200 structures, including homes, factories, cultural heritage sites, have been damaged by the flames.
Looks very serious. Eun-hee, how have authorities been responding?
Yes, according to the government, over 100 helicopters are actively involved in the operation. But at around noon today, one helicopter crashed at the scene in Uiseong-gun County, with the pilot confirmed dead at the scene. Additionally, over 4,500 personnel are actively involved, and over 500 firefighting units focusing on key facilities and densely populated areas of Uiseong, Andong, Yeongyang, Cheongsong, and Yeongdeok.
The Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters, along with relevant ministries, local governments, public institutions, volunteers, and village leaders on the front lines, is fully mobilizing all efforts to combat the wildfire and protect residential areas.
We're eagerly awaiting the rain forecast for tonight and tomorrow, but the expected amount is small, so it's uncertain whether it will help extinguish the fire. But even a small amount could offer some relief, and authorities are hoping for any assistance it may bring. That's all I have for you, Jung-min.
All right, that was our Ian here reporting live from Andong in Gyeongsang-buk-do province. Do stay safe. In related news, major political parties are joining efforts to combat the devastating wildfires. The ruling People Power Party formed a special committee on Wednesday to aid fire suppression and discuss recovery strategies. It also called for bipartisan cooperation to ensure public safety. The main opposition Democratic Party also pledged full support, urging authorities to do their best as the fires spread across regions. We now turn to a major ruling today that could mean much to the politics on the local front. An appellate court acquitted the opposition leader Lee Jae-myung of election violation charges, overturning the lower court's decision. Our correspondent Shin Ha-young explains.
The main opposition Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung has been acquitted by an appeals court with regard to election violation charges. The Seoul High Court on Wednesday overturned a ruling by a lower court which had handed Lee a suspended prison term. Lee was indicted on charges of making false statements in December 2021 during a media interview where he denied knowing the late Kim Moon-gi, an executive involved in a development scandal in Andong City where Lee previously served as mayor. He is also accused of having made false claims that there was pressure from South Korea's land ministry to rezone a research institute site in the Baekhyun-dong area. The appellate court ruled that neither of the statements made by Lee can be seen as spreading false information, overturning the Seoul Central District Court's ruling in November. The lower court found Lee guilty of making false statements, though it said that parts of statements regarding Kim could not be considered a violation of the election law. It handed Lee a 1-year prison sentence, suspended for 2 years. Prosecutors demanded the Seoul High Court give a 2-year prison term for Lee during the appellate trial, the same sentence as they demanded in the first trial. Right after the ruling, Lee thanked the court for delivering what he called a proper ruling.
I appreciate the court for delivering a proper ruling based on truth and justice, but it's frustrating that so much effort and national resources were spent on something so obvious.
The DP also welcomed the ruling, saying that the investigation and indictment were baseless from the start. Meanwhile, the ruling People Power Party expressed regret over court's ruling and said that it will wait for the Supreme Court's decision.
We deeply regret this ruling. Many politicians have lost their political careers due to false statement charges, so I can't understand how Lee was acquitted on the same issue, even from a legal professional's perspective.
The prosecution announced that it will appeal the Seoul High Court's ruling at the Supreme Court. Now, if the Supreme Court decides to overturn Wednesday's ruling, sentencing Lee to a fine of 1 million Korean won, which is about $680 or more, he would lose his legislative seat and be barred from running in elections for 5 years. If sentenced to a prison term, the ban extends to 10 years. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
For a closer look on what today's ruling could mean for the nation, we're joined by our political correspondent Kim Do-yeon. Do-yeon, why does the opposition's leader legal case matter?
First, the obvious reason is that Democratic Party of Korea Chair Lee Jae-myung is the most favored candidate to be the next president. And as we all know, there could be an early presidential election that will kick off within a matter of weeks if the Constitutional Court upholds President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment. Take a look at the most recent survey. According to a survey conducted by Gallup Korea on 1,003 adults aged over 18 from last Tuesday to Thursday, DP leader Lee Jae-myung was the most favored candidate for the next presidency at 36%, followed by Labor Minister Kim Moon-soo at 9% and former PPP leader Han Dong-un at 4%. This, of course, was surveyed before the ruling today. That means there are some swing voters who could have had doubts over Lee Jae-myung due to the legal battles. And since he's been found not guilty, he could be attracting more voters.
But is this case over and done with?
Of course, the case can be taken to the Supreme Court, as we heard from Ha-young, which will be then the final and definite ruling. Now, since it's the prosecutors that lost the case this time, at the appeals court, they're the ones that will have to give the appeals to the case. The ruling People Power Party lawmakers are already calling for prosecutors to do so. As we saw from Ha-young's report just now, if there is an appeal and if the Supreme Court overturns the latest decision to acquit Lee Jae-myung, Lee will lose his legislative seat and be barred from running for a public office for the next 5 years. Here's the thing, the Supreme Court has 3 months to make a ruling if prosecutors do appeal. That means even if the Constitutional Court's decision to uphold President Yoon's impeachment will kick off the presidential election within a couple of weeks, it will have to be done in just 60 days. This means, theoretically speaking, DP Chair Lee Jae-myung could be the president before the Supreme Court rules on his case anyway, which would pause the legal process. Article 84 of South Korea's constitution states that the president shall not be charged with a criminal offense during his tenure of office, barring insurrection or treason. And it's all up to the Supreme Court's decision. Take a listen to an expert.
Even if the prosecutors speed up the appeal process and Lee doesn't purposely delay the legal process, the final issue at hand would be the will of the Supreme Court.
Does this affect President Yoon's impeachment case at the Constitutional Court?
Now, to put it simply, it shouldn't. But the two cases have always been tied together in context as it has to do with the country's two most influential politicians, the president and the chairman of the main opposition, which also has the majority on the floor. And by the looks of it, the verdict from the Constitutional Court won't be coming this week, as there were no announcement today, and it usually comes 2 days before the ruling. Now, it's highly likely that it will come before April 18, though, when 2 justices retire. In the meantime, messages from politicians could be different. For example, the ruling People Power Party lawmakers have been accusing Lee of delaying the trial process for his alleged crime, so the presidential election happens before the final ruling. However, Lee has been acquitted, and while prosecutors may appeal, such a message may not carry the same weight as it did before this latest ruling.
All right, Toyon, thanks for the report.
Thank you.
The number of newborns in January noted a remarkable rise from a year ago, having surged over 11%. Park Jun-han covers the latest findings.
As of January, the number of childbirths in South Korea has been on the rise for 7 consecutive months. According to Statistics Korea's data on Wednesday, the number of childbirths in January 2025 was 23,947. This number is 11.6% higher than the 21,461 births in January 2024. That's the biggest percentage increase since related data was first compiled. South Korea's total fertility rate, the average number of children a woman would have during her lifetime, also increased from January 2024's 0.8 children to this January's 0.88 children. The statistics show an increase in the total fertility rate for 25 to 29-year-olds, those in their 30s, and those aged 40 and over. The number of marriages in South Korea has been rising for the past 10 months, with the marriage rate increasing by over 10% compared to the year before for all those 10 months, except for June 2024 and January 2025. In January 2025, the number of marriages came to 20,153, 0.7% higher than that of January last year.
If you look at the marriage growth rate, it has been increasing since April 2024 until now. In January 2025, there was a 0.7% increase, so it looks like the growth rate has decreased a little bit. But it's actually due to the impact of 4 fewer reporting days because of the Seollal holiday in January 2025. If the number of reporting days hadn't decreased by 4, the marriage rate would have been in the 20% range, or at least in double-digit growth.
Even though there has been a recent increase in births and marriages, the declining population in aging society remain concerns for South Korea. As a result of 39,473 deaths in January 2025, the country saw a natural population decline of 15,526 people. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
In other news, U.S. intelligence authorities raised fresh alarms over additional nuclear tests by North Korea and says the regime may use an ICBM tests as an leverage in future talks with Washington. Lee Jae-myung has more.
North Korea may be ready to conduct a nuclear test on short notice. That's according to the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who made the remark while addressing Congress on the 2025 Annual Threat Assessment of the U.S. intelligence community. While assessing security challenges from China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and others, she stressed that Pyongyang is likely prepared to conduct its seventh nuclear test. She added that the regime continues to flight test ICBMs to demonstrate their increasing capabilities as leverage in future negotiations. Her comments are in line with Seoul's assessment that the North has already completed preparations for another nuclear test. Pyongyang last conducted a nuclear test in 2017. The director also noted that the regime is looking to achieve at least tacit recognition as a nuclear power, as North Korean leader Kim Jong-un pursues stronger strategic and conventional capabilities that can target U.S. forces and allies in the region, as well as the U.S. homeland. She added that through such weapons, North Korea is looking to bolster its leverage and stature. Gabbard said those goals are being supported by a strategic partnership with Russia, which gives the regime greater financial, military, and diplomatic assistance. She also said the deployment of North Korean troops to the Kursk region is providing the regime with authentic war-fighting experience. Lee Jae-myung, Arirang News.
Russia and Ukraine have agreed to a naval ceasefire in the Black Sea and to suspend strikes on energy sites in separate deals with the U.S. as a result of 3 days of talks in Saudi Arabia. On the other hand, with a distinct lack of trust between Moscow and Kyiv, both sides said they would rely on Washington to enforce the deals. After the U.S. announcements, the Kremlin said the Black Sea agreements would only come into effect if a number of sanctions against its agricultural export bank were lifted. Effort to better accommodate adoptees from overseas seeking to trace their roots here in Korea continue, with both the government and private entities offering assistance. P&G has their story.
Kim Sperling was born in Seoul in 1975 and was sent to an adoption agency when he was a month old. He was then adopted in Germany when he was just 7 months.
In a way, I probably totally bought the whole adoption thing that the agency might try to sell to adoptive parents. If I had questioned that, there would have been no place where I could have found answers at that time. You know, in the 80s and the 90s, nobody knew anything about Korea.
He first returned to Korea at the age of 30, seeking to find his roots.
For me, it was about, okay, I gotta clear that relationship between me and Korea. I mean, it's there, and I cannot deny it.
That's when he also made efforts to find his biological parents.
Well, I started looking for them in 2006, so a few weeks later I got an email, and it's like, well, you know, we looked at the files and we contacted the hospital, and they had another file, and yeah, we have a name of your mother. They had a name, I had a birth date, but the police wouldn't locate any person with a matching name and birth date.
He now lives in Korea with his wife and 2 children. He's also a photographer who has worked on projects that portray different stories about Korean adoptees who return to their country of birth. His works also include projects that relate to his Korean heritage, including Dokdo, as well as Korean nurses and miners who were sent to Germany in the mid-1900s.
I'd say I am Korean, I am German, and you know, it's like the way my Koreanness is something that, like, my Korean identity, like my consciousness is like still evolving. It's like I'm learning every day.
Sterling was just one of many Korean children who were sent abroad for adoption. Since 1953, after the country was ravaged by the Korean War, around 200,000 Korean babies are known to have been sent to other countries. Louise Lindberg was adopted in Sweden when she was 12. After working as a social worker in Sweden for 18 years, she decided to return to the country where she was born. She now helps overseas Korean adoptees reconnect with their heritage at a non-profit organization and explains many of those who return have said they feel safe and comfortable.
And just like things like, hey, people just like look like me. And they feel really comfortable because I ask, why did you come? What is the best thing with being in Korea? And they say like, everybody just look like me and I can just feel safe.
The South Korean government is also making efforts to help these Korean adoptees who grew up overseas. The Overseas Korean Agency newly opened a service counter in Central Seoul, aimed at providing a one-stop service that will not only provide interpretation services, but also help them find their birth parents.
One example of the services that this counter could provide is finding parents using DNA matches or providing adoption information.
As the country continues to acknowledge its past on adoption, the government is now hoping to provide full support to make up for decades of lost time. 배은지, Arirang News.
The highest level of wildfire crisis warning, severe level, is in effect all over the country, with dry weather warnings and advisories issued in Gyeongsang-buk-do province, the eastern parts of the country, inland areas, and Jeju Island. It is important to take extra precautions not to cause any fires. The rain we have been waiting for to relieve the dryness is finally here. Starting with Jeju Island from late afternoon, it will expand to the south coast tonight and most parts of the country tomorrow. The amount of rainfall will not be as much as expected. There's about 5 to 30 millimeters forecast for Jeju Island, 5 to 20 millimeters on the west and south coast, and 5 millimeters in some parts of Gyeongsang-buk-do province where wildfires are still burning. Tomorrow morning will start mild with rain across the country. Highs will move up to 19 degrees Celsius in Seoul and Daejeon, 24 degrees in Daegu and Gyeongju. Temperatures are expected to fall after the rain stops tomorrow. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
Curious about Korea?
And especially K-food? How familiar are you with Korean food? The sea on 3 sides, a mountainous terrain, and 4 distinct seasons. Thanks to these conditions, Korean cuisine bursts with diverse and unique flavors.
Do you prefer sweet or spicy?
A meat lover or a seafood connoisseur?
Can't decide?
There's got to be something here that you like.
For Koreans, rice is foundational. It's a staple and the centerpiece to all meals in Korea. There's bibimbap, rice mixed with vegetables, gukbap, rice in hot soup, and kimbap is the demand around the world.
For me, it's noodles over rice. Korea has amazing noodle dishes. Chuy ramen and cold naengmyeon to blow away the heat. A meat lover here, pork, beef, chicken, I like them all. Did you know that bulgogi is listed in the English dictionary? There's also the famous chimek, chicken and beer, which is the best combo for a night out with friends.
Surrounded by the sea on 3 sides, Korea has a great selection of seafood, from raw fish to piping hot seafood soups. It's mouth-watering just talking about it. The 2 pillars of Korean condiments, gochujang and soy sauce.
Ooh, what do you prefer?
Gochujang. I like anything made with gochujang. In general, Koreans love spicy food.
I prefer the soy sauce base. There's something about the salty and sweet that hits the right spot. I think even those who are trying Korean food for the first time will really like it.
But that's not all.
We can't leave out the street food. If you're in Korea, it's a must-try. They are both treats for your eyes and mouth.
How about it? Mouth-watering, right?
Korean food, you've got to try it. Discover a whole new world of flavors.
Our lives are swept into a vortex of this intricately connected world. Providing an in-depth exploration of global security, diplomacy, economy, and culture to offer a unique international perspective. Embark on a global news journey with the GeoVista today.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most up-to-date issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. The first South Korea-U.S. joint military drill under the Trump 2.0 administration, the Freedom Shield, wrapped up on March 20th. The 11-day exercise simulated threats from North Korea's shifting strategy, growing ties with Russia, and modern warfare tactics like nuclear and drone attacks. Pyongyang fired a surface-to-air missile and slammed the drills as a provocative nuclear war rehearsal. At the same time, back-to-back high-level visits between North Korea and Russia hint at deepening military cooperation, including arms exports and possible troop deployments. With Washington showing signs of distancing itself from Seoul, concerns are mounting over shifting alliances and what they mean for South Korea's security. For a deeper discussion on this, we invite Evan Servier, former U.S. Acting Assistant Secretary of State and non-resident senior fellow in the Foreign Policy Program at Brookings. Welcome.
Good to be with you.
And also joining us is Park Won-gon, Professor of North Korea Studies at Ewha Women's University. Great to see you, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start right away. Mr. Revere, so the Freedom Shield exercises concluded a few days ago, and North Korea reacted sharply at the start of the drills, launching several ballistic missiles, but it later shifted to verbal criticism and refrained from launching stronger military provocations during the remainder of the exercise. What's the reason behind this? Why did North Korea, which had warned of, high-intensity provocations, opt for restraint?
Well, I'd be quite reluctant to describe North Korea's response to Freedom Shield as restrained, quite frankly, unless your definition of restraint is the fact that North Korea didn't launch kinetic military action against the South and against the United States. But obviously, there was virtually no chance that North Korea was going to engage in any sort of military provocation or military action in the face of a United States Republic of Korea military exercise that involved significant numbers of forces, highly capable and well-armed forces that were on a high state of alert. So North Korea's response to that exercise, that military exercise, consisted of some, as you noted, some very strong rhetoric in keeping with its normal practice. But at the same time, it combined that rhetoric with some important reminders of North Korea's growing military capabilities. It launched, as you noted, ballistic missiles. It tested a new anti-aircraft missile system in recent days. At the same time, it showed off what it claimed to be a nuclear-propelled, nuclear-powered submarine, which, if that's the case, would be a significant addition to North Korea's arsenal. And also, and this was very troubling, North Korea, in the midst of all of this, gave us a very emphatic reminder of its self-described status as a nuclear weapon state. So that rhetoric included that claim as well. And then, of course, as you noted, we've had some visits, including a visit by a senior Russian official that symbolized the ongoing and growing cooperation, security cooperation and military cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang. So all of those things and other developments, including ongoing development of North Korea's nuclear weapons program, I don't describe those things as showing restraint. I describe all of those things as showing a continuing threat and a growing threat that we need to be quite concerned about.
Right. So North Korea was clearly not happy with what was going on.
Exactly.
And on March 21st, the day after the Freedom Shield ended, in fact, North Korea announced it had successfully test-fired its latest surface-to-air missile as well. And there's speculation that this test may have been aimed at verifying performance of missiles intended for export to Russia. Professor Park, do you think this could be considered as an evidence of military technical cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow?
Well, first of all, I basically agree to what just Mr. Veal just mentioned. And we all know that North Korea never ever give up the provocation against South Korea and United States. But this time, a little bit, I see some differences. I mean, when South Korea and United States conduct joint military exercise, North Korea respond with some counter exercise. and also multiple missile launches. But this time, I haven't seen this kind of activity by North Korea so far. So it seems to be North Korea is just simply wait what the Trump administration articulate the North Korean policy. Okay, back to the questions you just asked. As for the surface-to-air missile tests on March 21st, it does not appear to me to be intended for export to Russia. Russia is not in urgent need of the surface-to-air missiles in its war against Ukraine, as Ukraine's air power is relatively limited. On the contrary, it is the North Korea that has a significant weakness in air power. In fact, North Korea's air force is virtually non-existent and lacks the capability to detect, identify, and intercept South Korea-U.S. air power. Therefore, North Korea is likely developing surface-to-air missile system to counter the advanced air power of the U.S. alliance. And it is even possible, and so legendary known, that North Korea is trying to get some of the advanced air defense system from Russia, such as S-200, to compensate for its own shortcomings.
Right, so it's not mainly a focus on its exports to Russia itself. Now, let's delve deeper into North Korea's ties with Russia. On the same day, Secretary of the Russian Security Council, Sergei Shoigu, visited North Korea for a 2-day trip. Mr. Revere, could you explain for our viewers who is this figure and why is his visit so significant?
Well, Shoigu is a very experienced military man. Extensive experience not only as a uniformed officer, but also as defense minister for many years, and now, of course, as head of Russia's Security Council. He is part of Vladimir Putin's inner circle. He's a trusted advisor, someone that Putin can depend upon, and he's played a very high-profile role in the campaign against Ukraine. Such a high-profile role that you may remember when the Wagner Group carried out its ill-fated military action and coup inside Russia. One of their primary targets of criticism was Shoigu because of the role that he has played, and in the view of some, the mismanagement that he was accused of having had as he pursued that campaign against Ukraine. But Putin does rely on him, and he relies on him as his point man to coordinate Russia, North Korea, security cooperation and military cooperation. He's also been in charge of the talks with the North Koreans aimed at soliciting North Korean troop contributions to Russia's war effort against Ukraine. And on previous visits, of course, Shoigu met with Kim Jong-un to discuss security cooperation and Russian assistance to North Korea, as well as North Korean participation in the war against Ukraine. And I believe it's pretty likely that these topics were on Shoigu's agenda with Kim Jong-un during this current visit to North Korea. Just another biographical note, Shoigu is a member of the Turkic cultural and linguistic minority in Russia. He supposedly speaks several languages, including Chinese and Japanese, which is quite impressive. Mm-hmm. But once again, it's his military skills and the respect that many people in the military and many people in Putin's inner circle have for him that explains why he's playing the significant role that he is playing right now.
Right. So thank you for providing us with the background of Shoigu. His presence shows it isn't really just symbolic. It's really strategic alignment between Moscow and Pyongyang seems to be evident. So Shoigu's visit to North Korea came right after Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Rudenko's visit in mid-March. Given the timing and scheduling of the visit, some people say that this is quite unusual. Professor Park, what about you? What do you think is the background behind his visit?
Well, I think it is a little bit unusual. You are right. And timing suggests that probably there is some urgent matter may have arisen between Russia and North Korea that required this kind of immediate discussions. There are two main reasons to support these assumptions. First, it is possible that this agreement emerged during the March 15th meeting between the Rudenko and North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Kim Yong-gil, prompting Putin to take swift action to manage the situation by dispatching Shoigu. Notably, Shoigu's visit lasted only 1 day and included just 2.5-hour meeting with Kim Jong-un, which is highly unusual in diplomatic terms. And second, North Korea's official media, KCNA, indirectly suggests that substantive issues were under discussion. According to their report on March 22nd, KCNA said that Kim Jong-un and Shoigu confirmed a fully aligned position. And also it emphasized that both leaders expressed their willingness to unconditionally implement the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Treaty, which is signed on June last year. Ironically, North Korea's use of terms like the fully aligned and unconditional implementation may suggest that there has actually been the points of disagreement or delays the implementation behind the scenes. From the North Korean perspective, it seems to me that there could be some growing discomfort with Russia. Pyongyang envisions forming a new Cold War bloc with Russia, and of course, they definitely want to have China to counter the United States. However, with Trump aiming to draw Russia closer, and Kim Jong-un's vision of this whole new Cold War alignment could be undermined. Additionally, if the Russian-Ukraine war moves toward a resolution, probably some different views may emerge between Moscow and Pyongyang over the future of these relationships. So that's why Shoigu is immediately sent to the Pyongyang and meet Kim Jong-un.
Professor Park, there's also this speculation that we hear that Kim Jong-un and Secretary Shoigu may have discussed reciprocal compensation for the deployment of North Korean troops. Do you think Russia could provide advanced military technologies like ICBM, re-entry technology, or military reconnaissance satellites in exchange for further troop deployments from North Korea?
Well, about the ICBM, especially North Korea definitely need some technology like a re-entry vehicle technology. But I believe that there are two main reasons Russia is unlikely to transfer it to North Korea. First, Russia has historically been extremely cautious in sharing such sensitive technologies, even with allies or friendly nations. And second, ICBMs are designed to strike U.S. mainland. So if Russia were to transfer that capability, it would provoke a strong reaction from Washington. Since Russia needs to cooperate with the United States to bring the war in Ukraine to an end, it would not risk jeopardizing that by helping North Korea's ICBM program. But you just mentioned about the satellites. It's possible because the last year, May, North Korea suddenly attempted to launch a Malligyong 1-1 satellite, which is a very new type of launch vehicle that employed a more advanced propellant combination compared to the earlier Chollima-1. But we saw that that launch is totally failed. And logically, it would have made more sense for North Korea to use the Chollima-1 launch vehicle, which is successfully tested in 2023. So my question is that why North Korea abruptly switched to an untested, more sophisticated launch vehicle? One likely explanation is that North Korea anticipated a broader national demand for satellite missions and so to introduce and upgrade launchers. So this shift may have been facilitated by its growing space cooperation with Russia. It is possible that North Korea launch a system directly based on the Russian satellite launch technology.
Right, so they could have military technology exchanges, but not to the extent of ICBM technologies.
Yes, exactly.
Now, Mr. Revere, it's also reported that Shoigu delivered a personal letter from President Putin to Chairman Kim Jong-un, and some say that Kim may have been invited to Russia for Victory Day on May 9th. Though Russia has not made specific comments on this, how much likely do you think is a visit by Kim Jong-un to Russia?
Well, this relationship between Pyongyang and Moscow continues to unfold. Both countries have made a significant investment, if you will, in this relationship, and a logical next step, I think, for this relationship, if they wanted to continue the trajectory that their ties are on, would be, I think, a visit by Kim Jong-un to Moscow in the time frame that you mentioned. So I would not be surprised to see that at all. But in addition to the letter, in addition to a possible invitation, I think the other hot topic, if you will, on the agenda at this point between Moscow and Pyongyang is that the war that Russia is carrying out against Ukraine is moving into a new stage, and a very complicated stage, and I would say even a dangerous stage. And I think one of the topics on the agenda of immediate concern to Moscow is to ensure that the two countries are on the same page when it comes to what Moscow's strategy is in dealing with the United States and in dealing with Ukraine. And if that requires an additional investment by North Korea in additional troops who have played a not insignificant role in the recent rather successful Russian offensive, then it's possible that might have been on the agenda. But these are complicated times when it comes to the Ukraine issue, and I think Professor Pak made some very valid points about the possibility that the two sides are not necessarily on the same page. Hence, the dispatch of somebody that Putin trusts a lot, Mr. Shoigu, to Pyongyang.
Mm-hmm. But even though, if that visit actually happens, it'll be a powerful visual to see Kim and Putin side by side at a military parade, of course. Indeed. Now, last week, North Korea sent government delegations on economy and health to Russia, indicating that bilateral cooperation is expanding across multiple areas. Professor Park, as the peace negotiations in Ukraine seem to show progress, do you think North Korea-Russia partnership would continue to deepen? And also, in the face of deepening ties, how should South Korea respond?
Well, there are two very contrasting scenarios regarding the future of the North Korea-Russian relations. First, it is possible that the two countries will continue to maintain and even deepen their cooperation. For Russia, which is now isolated from the meaningful exchange with European nations, sustained engagement with North Korea remains a viable option. North Korea, for its part, may continue leveraging ties with Russia to draw China closer, especially as its relationship with Beijing has shown a sign of strength. And second, there is a possibility that their cooperation could gradually weaken. After the war in Ukraine ends, Russia would no longer need the North Korean troops deployments or a steady supply of artillery shells and missiles. Moreover, if Russia seeks to improve relations with the United States as part of the post-war settlement, it may find it increasingly uncomfortable to maintain the same level of cooperation with North Korea, which remains staunchly anti-American. So South Korea should prepare for the both scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Now, on a separate occasion, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence from the U.S., said at the Senate Intelligence Committee that North Korea is ready to conduct additional nuclear tests at any time, and assessed that Chairman Kim Jong-un has no intention of giving up nuclear weapons through talks, through negotiations. Professor Park, this perception is similar to that of the previous Biden administration. What impact does this have on U.S.-North Korea dialogue?
Well, it is widely understood that Kim Jong-un has no intention to giving up his nuclear weapons. And in Washington, the prevailing view is that complete denuclearization of North Korea is no longer a realistic goal. This sentiment was reflected last year when both Republican and Democratic parties omitted complete denuclearization of North Korea from their respective party platforms in July and August. However, this is precisely why we must continue to pursue North Korea's complete denuclearization. As seen in recent U.S.-Japan summit statements and the ROK U.S.-Japan foreign ministers' joint communique, it is essential to reaffirm the complete denuclearization of North Korea as the goal of the Trump administration, both through official documents and the statements by the key policymakers. At the same time, South Korea and the United States must continue to effort to strengthen the institutionalized extended deterrence. These ongoing efforts are crucial to reducing the perceived value of North Korea's nuclear arsenal and increasing the chances that Pyongyang will eventually return to the negotiation table. The South Korean government should work in close coordination with the Trump administration and ensure that these elements are incorporated into North Korea's policy.
So we'll really have to see how Trump's 2.0 administration would proceed with his policies on North Korea moving forward. Now, let's also talk about Tulsi Gabbard's recently visit to 4 Asian countries, which is excluding South Korea. And U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is also reportedly excluding South Korea from his Indo-Pacific tour next week. Mr. Revere, do you think this could be seen as a sign of Korea passing becoming a reality? And what kind of measures do you think could be taken?
Well, I think the United States government, U.S. officials remain quite sensitive to the ongoing political crisis that South Korea is going through. And they're also quite sensitive to the uncertainty that continues to prevail in Seoul these days. And with South Korea's leadership situation still somewhat unclear and the future policy direction also not very clear, I'm not surprised that there have not been very many high-level visits by senior U.S. officials. But with Prime Minister Han now restored as acting president, and with a decision on President Yoon's impeachment by the Constitutional Court forthcoming in the next few days, I'm hopeful that with those developments, we're going to start to see a more normal senior level spate of visits between Washington and Seoul, and that I think will be a good thing. But I can't help but say in this context and share with you what I've been sharing with some of my South Korean friends who are concerned about Korea passing. And that is, I've been telling them, be careful what you wish for, because as the Trump administration increasingly turns its attention to Asia and increasingly turns its attention to South Korea, it's not hard to figure out that there are going to be a range of issues, whether it's tariffs, whether it's burden sharing, whether it's how to deal with North Korea, et cetera. There are going to be a range of issues in which Washington and Seoul are not necessarily going to be on the same page. And so I think we may be in for some perhaps troubled waters in the next 2 weeks or the next few months or so. So people may look on this so-called Korea passing phase as probably a good thing, because it put off the inevitable confrontation between two governments. But I hope that confrontation doesn't come. But as I said, be careful what you wish for.
Right, so we are inevitably having a delay in a confrontation between the U.S. and South Korea. But nevertheless, we have to sort out the political situation here to actually sort this out. So we will have to wait and see until how the rulings go by. But as of now, we'll have to wrap up our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Park and Mr. Revere. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.
오면 굉장히 일단 자연의 소리로 가득 차고 조용하거든요. 저도 그렇고 많은 사람들이 산을 통해서 많은 에너지를 얻고 또